Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I am going to share my review of Cult of the Cave Crickets from Dark Star Adventures. This is available by way of Goodman Games. This is written by Jeff Demers with artwork provided by Casey Lynch. This 30-page softcover with PDF carries an MSRP of $19.99. And you can order that from the Goodman Games website. But if you want to just grab the PDF alone, you can do that over at Drive-Thru RPG for $9.99. All that said, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got Cult of the Cave Crickets for Dungeon Crawl Classics. A few things to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, the fine folks over at Dark Star Adventures were kind enough to provide me with this review copy. But neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. These days, it's important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the adventure, but I do want to give you a good feel for what you're going to find inside. And then lastly, this is an adventure. So if you are a player and your game master has picked this up, or maybe they're considering picking this up, by all means, I definitely recommend tune out. Even though I'm going to stay away from major spoilers, there are going to be some spoilers. And of course, as we flip through, you're probably going to see some things that ruin some surprises of the adventure. So once again, as a player, I recommend tuning out. Now, of course, if your game master has been considering picking this up, by all means, let them know about this review. That way they can approach this and make a far more informed buying decision. All right, let's dive on in. First thing we're going to do is take a peek at the credits page. Quite a few people worked very hard to bring this to life. If you do follow my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, you may recall that we were sponsored for a bit by Dark Star Adventures and the Cult of the Cave Crickets Kickstarter, which obviously enough was a successful crowdfunding run. So the adventure itself, as I mentioned, is for Dungeon Crawl Classics. It is for 4 to 6 level 2 characters. So of course, if you're familiar with Dungeon Crawl Classics, level 2 equates to most retro clones, which go up to like 20 levels as 4th level. So keep that in mind because you can easily convert this over to just about any other fantasy OSR retro clone or even OD&D, AD&D, and so forth. So the adventure itself, the player characters find themselves searching for this group of scientists who went to go study this fallen star. Now, there are a few different adventure hooks, which I appreciate because just the standard hook to get the players involved more comes from the angle where the player characters are good folk, right? Lawful folk, which isn't necessarily always the case. So we do get a few different alternate starting hooks for the player characters, like that a bunch. So what's going on here is the player characters are investigating the disappearance of these scientists. They end up going inside this cave system, which of course there must be crickets there. Otherwise, why would this be called Cult of the Cave Crickets? And we do have this race of cricket people. They are sentient and they are hostile to the player characters. And they're pretty interesting. I do like them quite a bit. And they worship this fungus god. So if you are a fan of fungi, sorts of underworld adventuring, then this is going to fit in very nicely because there's a lot of different funguses and mycelium that are involved in this. Now, I will point out that when the adventure begins, when the player characters enter into the cave system, something happens to one of the characters who has the lowest personality score. I got to be honest, I'm never a fan of something being just thrown at a player that they have to deal with just randomly. I have absolutely no problems with players having to deal with the repercussions of their own actions, but I'm never really much for saddling a player with an affliction of some sort. Also, it's going to kind of put a lot of the spotlight on that player as well. Not super keen on that. I should also mention, kind of surprised that this is statted for Dungeon Crawl Classics. Not that I've got a problem with Dungeon Crawl Classics. If you follow the Gaming Gang, you know I really like DCC. But the adventure itself is pretty straightforward. So we don't have a lot of that underlying kind of gonzo attitude that we tend to see with the DCC adventures, especially those which are published by Goodman Games. But we also see a good amount of that in many of the third party adventures which are published for DCC. That's not necessarily the case here. I'm not going to knock it for that. I'm just saying I could easily have seen this statted out for Osric or Labyrinth Lord, Swords and Wizardry, Old School Essentials, probably quicker than, say, Dungeon Crawl Classic. So I'll have to take a guess. Jeff Demers must run a DCC campaign. That's why it's a DCC adventure. Something else I really like is there are some nods to H.P. Lovecraft, especially at the Mountains of Madness. I certainly picked up on that and I liked it quite a bit. So, all in all, this is a solid adventure. It might not necessarily be for everyone. It's got a nice mix of investigation, combat, traps, not a ton of interactivity, though. So, I will mention that as far as game masters who like to have the shiny red button that should the player characters push that or not. But all in all, pretty solid adventure. And let's swing on over to the other camera so I can share some final thoughts and give Cult of the Cave Crickets a review score. So, as I've already mentioned, I definitely like the adventure. Kind of surprised it's for DCC and not OSE or Osric or Labyrinth Lord, Swords and Wizardry, and so on and so forth. All those various different retro clones which are out there. But this is a solid adventure. I could see my players having a good time with it. I don't like the fact that you're going to saddle the player character who's got the lowest personality with essentially an affliction. Not a big fan of that. I will say that this adventure could be very lethal very easily, especially if you have relative newcomers to role playing games playing this. I think this kind of does need more experienced players as well as an experienced game master to really get the most out of this adventure. I also like the kind of nods that you will find to H.P. Lovecraft as well as at the Mountains of Madness. Definitely dug that quite a bit. So, on a scale of 0 to 10, I give Cult of the Cave Crickets from Dark Star Adventures a 7.5 out of 10. Certainly recommend it. May not necessarily be for everyone, but I could see my players, at least my gang, having a really good time with this adventure. All right, that's it for this time out. If you liked the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell because it'll not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. And until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.